Look at the red going down the board. The Tories are not defending anything in England at this point.
The reason that I voted for Labour was part protest to get the Conservatives out, who were clearly not keen on the Leasehold Reform Act.
I've been voting Conservative for 25 years, but in 2024 I changed and voted Labour. Well, I thought maybe Labour, with a more socialist agenda, might actually prioritise people and people trying to live in their homes.
In our previous MP, Conor Burns, I was never aware of any efforts or anything that he contributed to the leasehold versus freehold debate, and not that surprised that he was voted out. When I say the word change, or when I hear the word change, I assume that they were talking about and genuinely meant major change. And this is something which I believe this whole discussion about leasehold reform, it requires major change. It has to be leasehold abolition rather than reform.
And because of all this, I actually, for the first time at the age of 68, I joined the Labour Party. I went out canvassing for the Labour Party.
I don't feel like the Tories properly cared about leaseholders.
I'm in Southend Eastern Rochford district. We have now a new Labour MP who I have written to.
Done with Conservative, they let me down badly, single issue voter. Labour comes along and they say, we're going to abolish leasehold.
Now you might be thinking, hang on a sec, we've just had a general election in the summer. Labour wins massive majority, we can leave them alone for the next 5 years. Wrong. We at Free Leaseholders are already thinking about 2028, 2029, those polls. And we're not alone. Top Labour strategists and thinkers are doing the same.
Labour Together, the influential Labour-aligned think tank, have put out a fantastic report I urge you all to read. According to their findings, the decisive group of voters in July was small. Just 12% of 2019 Conservative voters switched to Labour. But their influence, especially in the marginals, was what propelled Starmer to power. The switchers are older than the average voter, average age 52, more men than women. But cost of living was their top concern with health, and leasehold is a cost of living issue. The report considered the effect of housing on vote switching. It found that the only voters the Tories could still count on in July were those who own their homes outright. But this is perhaps the most striking and important page in the whole report. Labour recognise that today's voters are volatile, especially the switchers. Most are willing to give Labour no more than 2 years to deliver on their promises. The Labour government has been cautiously hired on a trial basis, liable to prompt dismissal, the report warns.
And that's why we Free Leaseholders are today in Blackpool South. I've been speaking to leaseholders. One's very kindly offered to be on camera.
Stephen is a habitual Conservative voter who took a chance on Labour in July. He's a military veteran and a Brexit voter.
From a political point of view, I think I can actually describe myself as a lifelong Conservative voter, except at the last election. So I decided to give Labour a chance. Now, I reasonably expect Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, to honour his commitment and get rid of leasehold. Now, when I say get rid, I would like him to do it as quickly as possible and not leave it 2 weeks before the next general election, because if he does, I certainly wouldn't be voting for him again. And I think that could be said for a lot of people that I know of friends. I've got Labour supporters and Conservative, but a lot of Conservative supporters, like myself, effectively lent the Labour Party our vote, and we expect it to be delivered on. Leasehold must be abolished.
Now back down to Swindon North. John, another military vet who calls his politics centre-right, voted Labour for the first time in July.
From where I'm sat now, I'm realistic. I know that the government's short of money, the country's short of money, they are going to come knocking for taxes. The one thing I want the government to do in return is stop people from taking needless amounts of money from me for things that they're not really doing much for. Effectively to end the leasehold and fleecehold trap.
And in Southend Eastern Rochford, Phil desperately needs action from his new Labour MP.
10 years ago I did a lease extension, but my freeholder snuck in a onerous ground rent clause which doubles my ground rent every 10 years. So I now have a property I can't sell, unmortgageable. I feel like I'm ransomed, to move on. My life is put completely on hold at the moment.
A couple of years ago, I found out that my lease was too short to allow me to remortgage, let alone try and sell my property. I approached my landlord in what was a very costly exercise, along with one of my neighbours, to try and get a lease extension. The amount that they quoted at the end of the process was extortionate, in my opinion. It was 20% of the value of the property, way beyond what was affordable or reasonable.
It was the only option I had at that point in time to get onto the property ladder, so to speak. So when I got my flat, in my mind, it was like, okay, I'll be here for like 4 or 5 years, or there's something to that effect to allow me to build up equity. But the way that things are going, it just feels like I'm trapped, because I think I'm going to have a hard time selling my leasehold property to anyone in their right mind, with all the service charges that we've been charged today.
I must say, under the last 14 years, I voted Conservative in the last 14 years, but I was very appalled at the lack of progress that was made over helping leaseholders, because I believe it is a feudal system and that we should be getting common hold.
We were obviously quite encouraged when we thought Conservatives were going to get through some Leasehold Reform Act before the end of last Parliament. I have to say it was a bit disappointing how thin it was, and even more disappointing now that Labour, although they've said they're going to proceed with leasehold reform, haven't given any timetables, haven't given any ideas about when even the existing legislation will be enacted, let alone any new ideas.
The upshot of all this stuff was that I realised how little control I had over my whole life. And that was kind of mind-altering, to know that I had no control over anything that happened. The open purse that could be dipped into all the time infuriated me, and I resent it and I'm very angry about it, but it didn't hit me like the loss of control did. I felt so let down. I believed I lived in a country where there was fair play was real, that government looking out for the people was real. All these myths that I believed in, and having those stripped away has been life-changing. I don't trust people anymore. I no longer live in the world I used to live in. I now realise that the country is controlled by corporations, that I'm a cog, not a person. And it's been soul destroying.
There are leaseholders in these bellwether constituencies up and down the country who put Starmer to power. And if they don't see change that they voted for, that they don't see an insurgent government of delivery, they will move on. Here in this constituency, Reform, for example, they are snapping at the heels of Labour. They're in second place. They also promised action against leasehold in their manifesto. Research by More in Common has found that a modest Conservative revival strategy involving getting out just 10% of those that didn't vote in July to move to the Conservatives, plus half of those that voted Reform, would make them the single largest party in a hung parliament. And that is with Labour not losing a single vote that they got in July. So Labour can't just tread water and keep happy their 2024 coalition. They need to be finding more voters, new cohorts. And that means choosing an agenda that will not antagonise their existing voters, but that gets cut through elsewhere. Now, we put it to you that that is ending leasehold.
Will the Prime Minister recommit this government to act where the previous government failed, to reform the leasehold system, which is archaic, outdated and feudal?
Yes, we will reiterate our commitment to act to bring the feudal leasehold system to an end.
What can you do? Use your power. Email your MP now. Demand they switch on the Tory 2024 Act now. Demand they publish the draft Leasehold and Commonhold Reform Bill before Christmas. They've already promised both. In the July King's Speech, let's make them deliver.